So today we are going to have a flash talk on We Just Got Funded, Now What? By LJ Van Scoy and Erica Van Dyke, followed by a study startup story with Tim Sheehan. So again, during the case and the presentation, please feel free to put your questions in the chat. And we are going to introduce our wonderful hub team since there's too many of you lovely participants to introduce, but we want to make sure you know who's here helping us out today. So LJ, would you like to say good morning?
Mute myself. Okay. Hi, good morning, everyone. I'm LJ Van Scoy. I'm a faculty member in pulmonary critical care and excited to be here.
Thanks, LJ. And since Erica's right there, Erica.
Yes, good morning, everyone. If you were at our last Echo session, you may remember I had no voice, and happily I have my voice this week. So I'm very excited to be able to present with everyone. Thank you all so much for coming. I'm Dr. Van Scoy's program manager. I worked with her. Oh, LJ's program manager. I've worked with her for the last 3 years. And I'm also a doctor of public health candidate here at Penn State College of Medicine. So it's very nice to meet everyone.
Thank you so much, Erica. Steve, would you like to say good morning?
Hey, good morning, everybody. Steve Hicks. I'm in the Division of Academic General Peds.
Thanks, Steve. And Abby.
Hi, good morning, everybody. I'm Abby Fisher. I'm a research project manager and research navigator for the CTSI. Thanks for coming.
Thanks, Abby. And I just wanted to give our special guest a chance to say good morning because she's going to help us keep us on the straight and narrow. So Joan, would you like to say good morning?
Yes, good morning, everybody. My name is Joan Gensimer. I work in the Office of Research Affairs as a Grants and Contracts Administrator, focuses on the grant side. So I have worked with many of you that I see on my screen with the submission of your grant proposals as well as the awarding process.
Oh, and Jody as well. Sorry. Thanks, LJ. I wasn't sure if you joined us, Jody. Jody, would you like to say hello?
Sure. Good morning, everybody. My name is Jody Matthew. I'm an assistant director in our Human Research Protection Program. I manage our expedited and exempt team, and I'm here to help explain how the IRB and funding play around with each other. So I'm happy to be here and answer any questions.
Thanks so much, Jody. We appreciate your time. And our last guest observer, we'll try not to put him on the spot too much, is Tom Brideball. So he's here to help also keep us on the straight and narrow and learn about what we're doing. So welcome, Tom.
Thank you, Jessica. Good morning, everyone.
Thank you so much. So I am going to turn it over to LJ and Erica for their wonderful presentation. Please feel free to chat.
Okay. You are seeing the wrong screen, aren't you? Hold on. I had it all set up, remember? All right, here we go. Now it's good. All right. Share screen too. They see screen too. Okay.
Yes.
All right. Well, we are super excited. I am so grateful to the team at ORA, Joan and Tom and IRB, Jody, for helping us put this together. This is a really tough topic because there's so much, as we all know. And in our audience today, you know, I'm trying to scan through the names. I think we have a good mix of faculty and project managers. And so what we try to do in this session is make some points that are going to be relevant for our full audience and to really focus on how when you get a grant and you are getting that process started, how it's really a team that's working together and supportive of each other that really can make it go most smoothly. So quick disclaimer, this content was created for researchers by researchers, but with the support and guidance and multiple meetings and lots of teaching from ORA. So we couldn't have done this without you guys. We're so grateful for that. And the HRPP office and Jody at IRB. So the way that we're going to do this session today is Eric and I are going to tag team sort of what we call a checklist. And actually, Abby, hopefully we can screen share just a snapshot of what our checklist looks like. We're going to be sending this checklist out. We just have a few final edits to make and wanted to wait until after the session so that if we have any things that we want to incorporate from you, the audience's perspective, we can add that in. And I believe our one pagers from last time are being sent out as well. So our first 30 minutes, we're going to spend going over the checklist with points for both PIs and project managers or staff. And the idea here is to keep it high level. So we could dive into the deep, dark details, and we're going to try to stay away from that. So put your questions in the chat, even if they're super detailed. We may or may not, we may say we're going to get to that at another session. We may say that we're going to answer that on email, but please put your questions in, and we're going to try to answer as many as we can. But we really also want to make sure we have time to get to our second session, our second part of the session, which is going to be led by Erica, to really talk about, you know, okay, we've gotten through the whole checklist now. What do I do to get this from paper to boots on the ground getting started? So we're going to try to keep our eye on time for that in that way. So, okay, so the first thing we're going to do is talk about the alphabet soup, and Erica is going to start us off.
Yes, of course. So before we go through, you know, our checklist of the different processes when pre-award and post-award, it's really important for us all to kind of get an understanding of who the key players are and these people, the people that are here to help us. As LJ said, this is really a team effort from both the pre-award and the post-award side. And we could not do what we do without the folks that we're going to go through and talk about today. So first on our list here, we have the departmental research administrators, or DRAs. So this is someone in your department who's going to help you submit your grant to ORA, and then will also help organize your subawards. So this is the person in your department who's helping both pre and post award. In our department, this is Denise Vieira. Shout out to Denise if you're here. I contact Denise all the time with everything that I'm doing with LJ's lab. So the DRAs are really important in this process for study startup. Next is the grants and contracts officers, which we are so lucky to have Joan here with us today. So this is the person in ORA who's going to communicate on your behalf with NIH. And so this is solely on the pre-award side. And so the GOs work really closely with your DRA to get all those grant documents submitted. I don't know how I do.
Oh, you just click it. Yeah.
Oh, perfect. I'll just use the space.
Oh, okay. Fair.
Next important player on our list that you'll see throughout our checklist today is going to be the subaward grants officer. So this is an individual in ORA who's going to help negotiate your subawards, if applicable, between Penn State and your co-ICE institutions. And this is someone you interact with again, pre and post award.
Oops, sorry.
Oops, you're good.
And then last but not least, financial analysts. So that's someone in your department who's going to help with your financial reporting, grant compliance, and some of the financial management, and usually is typically on the post-award only to help organize your finances. And shout out to Danielle in our department. And I forgot to shout out Tressa, who is our subaward grant officer.
And if we're going to have on the one pager some information about, like, for your department, not everyone has it broken out the same way, different, you know, up at University Park, it's a little bit different, and there are multiple people in each department. So if you're not sure who your folks are, a good person to ask would be your like the person that bugs you for all of your compliance stuff. That person should know who your people are. So if you're not sure, that's who you should ask. Okay, so next what we're going to do is we're going to go through the checklist, and the checklist we have created is broken up into the roller coaster that is the process of getting a grant. And so we have the steps from, oh my gosh, I got my score, all the way down to study startup. And we're focusing on NIH today just because we wanted to sort of keep it, it could get too big if we went into PCORI and all the other things, but for the most part, most of the processes are similar, but if you, the audience, I don't have experience with PCORI, so if you have things to throw in the chat, like, hey, this is different in PCORI and here's how it works, or for DoD or other mechanisms, HRSA, please throw it in the chat, and ORA is here to answer questions as well if you have anything specific, but we're trying to keep it focused on NIH. So this is the process. We're going to go through each step by step, and this is the way that our one pager is organized. Which you'll get a copy of. So I'm going to start because usually this is the part where the PI is involved, where you got your score and you're freaking out and you're super excited and you should be celebrating. But of course, everyone says don't celebrate yet. The next step is you're going to get what's called a just in time. Your just-in-time document comes, there can be several of them. There can be one, I've gotten two, sometimes I've just gotten one. It really depends on where you are in the budget cycle. But the first thing that will happen after you get your summary statement and you've talked with your PO is for grants that are in a high scoring position. So I think the cutoff for NIH is 30. If you have an impact score of 30 or better, then they will automatically send you a just-in-time. So while I get really happy when I see my first just-in-time, you should know that it's coming if your score is within the range. So it's not like super exciting, but it's still one step closer. So as soon as you get your JIT, usually your department research administrator will reach out to you, but if not, if they're super busy and maybe missed it, you reach out to them. And this is the time where you just start updating documents. And so this is kind of a low hanging fruit. It's not very difficult. You update your other support documents, which are the ones that list, what grants you have so that the NIH can kind of cross-check what funds you have. Your anyone who's a key personnel or co-investigator in your grant will need to update their other support. If there's nothing, no changes, no updates, just you tell your DRA and they'll do their magic and let NIH know there's no updates. This is also the time you start collecting city certificates, and you need to start thinking about your IRB at this point. So this is the point when you get that first notification. I personally don't start writing my IRB at this point because I usually wait for the second just in time. But if you know that you're doing the study anyway, go ahead and get started. Activate your team, get everybody rolling. This is the time to let everybody know that they're coming, or that the JITs are starting to come. But it's the second one that really is like super exciting. And in general, you can call your program officer and they can give you a kind of estimate of like, we haven't, there's a council meeting in 3 weeks, and then you should be hearing within a month after that council meeting. And sometimes it's just like surprise. So it's really hard to know. But the second JIT is where I usually make my husband take me out to dinner. So that's like the really exciting part, because they generally don't send you a second. Someone please correct me if I'm wrong in this, but my understanding, at least from my institute and my program officer, is if you don't get your if they send you your second JS in time, they're really serious about funding your proposal. And this is when you make your call immediately to your staff and you're like, oh my gosh, let's get into IRB land. Let's contact our IRB rep through bookings. If you have multiple sites and are going to be sending data back and forth, or have reliance agreements, or anything that involves a second site, even if you're using a single IRB, the person to reach out to is Raphael. I don't know if Raphael is here. He was supposed to be. I didn't check in the thing to see if he's here, but he's extremely helpful and wonderful. And there's a form and a link that you can submit to him, which is linked in the one pager that we'll be sending you. So you contact him at this point as well to start talking about things. And all you have to do is say, like, I got my second just in time. It's my first time, help. And they know what to do, which is why having these partners are so great. I also take this time to let my bots know, take me off service. I'm a clinician. So if I have any major changes to my clinical schedule, this is the time to say, we got to look at this and make some changes. Look at your family situation. You're going to be busy for the next couple months. So this is when you really want to start clearing the decks. The other little detail things that happens in the second just in time is, again, depending on how long it's been since your first one, they may ask you to update your other support yet again. If there's no updates, no updates. They may ask you specific questions about your data management and sharing plans. They may ask you some things, but your PO will be really communicative with you. And again, if you just tell your PO, this is my first time, they have worked with many of us as first timers. And this is also, when you're reaching out to Raphael about your multi-site, you also want to start letting your sub-award co-investigators know that things are happening, the second just in time is happening, so they can start clearing their decks as well. Some of this sounds like common sense, but you'd be surprised. Sometimes we're so excited we forget to tell our whole team. So the next thing that I want to talk about is, well, are there any questions so far? I'm not looking in the chat. This is all kind of basic stuff.
Yep, not yet.
Okay, good. And it sort of happens automatically. This isn't really where the confusion comes. It's really when you get your second just in time and they say, you will not get a notice of award, which is a NOAA, until you submit your IRB approval, or what's called an LDP, lacking definitive plans. And that's what freaks me out every single time. And I go crazy because the timeline is always 1 month. And you're like, okay, how do they expect me to get an IRB prepared, submitted I have 5 sites on my trial, like whatever it is, all IRBs take a while. How do they possibly expect me to get this written and submitted within a month? And that is where I am here to tell you, do not panic. You have lots of options. There are lots of ways to think about this. So the first thing is to know is that if you can get your IRB approval, go for it. Write it down. I mean, again, if you've been working on your IRB since the first just in time, you might even be able to just get full approval. And that is strongly preferred. I mean, that's like slam dunk. You want to do that. But oftentimes you can't. Like in my study that I had just had funded, we had 5 sites across 3 states, very complex study. There was no way I was getting an IRB done within a month, but then they also weren't going to send me my money. And so I can't hire anybody. So you get into that chicken and the egg issue where you're like, well, if I don't have the IRB done, then they won't send me my notice of award, and HR won't let me hire someone that I need to help me write the IRB. So it's like very confusing about like, how the heck am I supposed to do all of this, particularly if you don't have people on your staff already. So at that point, that's where I wrote on the last slide, please don't panic about this. There are options and the IRB is here to help you. So the first thing I would recommend doing here is reaching out to the IRB team through bookings and ask them about tell them about your timeline, tell them, you know, this is what the study looks like. What do you recommend? And what they may recommend is something called a lacking definitive plan. And so if anyone has an experience with an LDP or with this process, throw it in the chat. I'd love to like hear you. I can see the chat now. So I'd love to hear other voices here to sort of tell us a little bit about what they've experienced. But real quickly, what the LDP is it may be that you don't need to get the entire IRB fully approved to get your notice of award. So the IRB can write a letter on your behalf that says, you know, they've submitted, you know, a proposal, we've submitted, you know, everything, but it's under review and the board isn't meeting for 6 more weeks, but we've received it and we've, you know, I think they say they've reviewed. I forget what it says in the letter. Maybe Jody can chime in and tell us like what it says, but it's usually good enough to get a NOAA sent to you. Or in my case, what we did was we had 5 sites and University of Kentucky was our IRB. And I was like, there is no way that we're going to get all of our 5 sites done in a month, but we could get 1 site done in a month. So what we did there is we said, okay, and this is what Kentucky told us to do, is they said, submit your IRB with just 1 site. We'll grant you your approval, but we'll let the NIH know that you haven't added your sites on. You're going to do that as a modification. And so when that happens, they can still send you your notice of award, but it has a human subjects restrictions because it, which I'll show you in a moment. But they basically say like, we know that you've gotten most of your proposal submitted, but not not completely finished, and that's okay. We'll still send you your notice of award. Jody, I see you put something in the chat. You want to say something?
Yeah, I threw a note in there that if you submit like a full study, the IRB protocol, recruitment materials, consent forms, we can do that letter that LJ was talking about that says, hey, they've submitted, it's currently under review. Here's the review timeline. The lacking definite plans letter is slightly different, where we're not asking you to submit a full IRB protocol because maybe you haven't developed your human subject studies yet. And so you need money for the first year to develop your human subject studies. You're not doing human subject research till year 3. And so that's that catch-22 that people are like, I can't get my money if I don't have IRB approval, and the IRB can't give you approval if we don't have a full submission. So the regulations allow us to do this lacking definite plans letter that says, hey, we've received the grant proposal, we've reviewed it, we have confirmation from the researcher that they're not going to start human subjects until they submit for full review and approval. And then we can give you this letter. And so then what we do is we withdraw the study from submission and put it back into pre-submission. And it's just sitting there waiting for you to be ready to submit a full proposal to us for review. And so that allows you to get your money, start hiring, start planning, start developing your human subject studies. Because the ironic part of it is your grant says the first year we're going to be developing human subject studies, but then NIH wants your IRB approval letter before they give you the money. And we can't give that to you yet because you don't have your studies developed yet. And that's okay. It's just kind of figuring out that process and what works best for you, because we don't want you wasting your time filling out a protocol if you're not quite sure what you're doing yet.
Does anybody have any like creative solutions that they had to this problem? I'm curious to know how other people have, or has anyone else experienced this? Am I alone in this experience? I doubt, but I don't see faces, so. Anyone want to speak up? No? All right.
I'll just speak up quickly with a resource that is available to people in pediatrics, which is because you mentioned it's hard to kind of get the study off the ground if you don't have funding yet. But if you're in pediatrics, we have the Pediatric Research Resources Office, and those people are hard funded through the department and can help anybody in pediatrics kind of get the ball rolling while they're waiting to get their funding. So.
And you're reminding me, I'm sure Abby, do you want to say something about ASAP?
Sure. So we have, and Stephen's here. Stephen's our ASAP staff member. So through the CTSI, we have an accelerated staff assistance program. And if you need support in this area, you can request support from ASAP. You can also always submit the research request form. I can put that in the chat too, if that's helpful. I've helped folks kind of get their IRBs started, send them in the right direction so that they can get that off the ground. But I will say, I want to, I know NIH, the reason that this is in place, at least my understanding, is because the IRB can take such a long time to, during a grant cycle, to be approved and for you to get started, that they just want to make sure that you have the appropriate systems in place, that you know what you're doing. So that's why they ask for this kind of upfront, but I will definitely put all those links in the chat. Thanks.
Thanks. And Abby and Stephen are doing a great job. The ASAP program is a centralized staffing program through CTSI. So it was a gap that we heard, and leadership at CTSI was wonderful to launch this program where we have staff members that can help you before you've had a chance to hire your own staff members. So definitely it's a new program. So really glad Abby and Stephen are helping out a lot of studies in this way. Just to show, this is a cut from my NOAA for the one that I showed you guys, or the example that we gave. So this was the one where we submitted with the single site, and we let the NIH know, we were approved for the single site, which was Kentucky, because it's a co-PI study, and Kentucky, we decided, was doing our IRB. And then they gave us a restriction. So they basically said, here's your notice of award. You can access your funds, sort of activates, everything institutionally that we need to get our study up and running. But it basically just says, with a lot of fancy language, that you can't recruit human subjects yet. And so they then started to ask us closer to December, hey, have you gotten your full IRB approval yet with all of your sites added? And so when we submitted that final approval, they sent a second notice of award, which was exactly the same for the most part, except that they rescinded the human subjects. And you can see the time difference. It was between August and December. So it took us that long just to add those sites, because we had to do reliance agreements with Raphael. We had to do all kinds of things. And so this is a good solution, is getting this, and just knowing that this is something that's possible, it's like a good Xanax for you. All right, Erica.
Okay, great. So as we're working through the timeline, we had our first just in time, second just in time. That's when really it's time for us to get started working on that IRB and getting that IRB documentation together. So as IRB questions come up, be proactive with that. Reach out to your IRB representative, use bookings, and just have conversations with your IRB reps. It's so much easier to just have that meeting and chat with them and ask for questions through than just trying to guess and submit and then have to work through some issues that could have been resolved proactively. One thing that is really important during this stage, because we know funding is close to arriving, is to just get ahead on some of the job posting forms. At the College of Medicine, there's 3 forms that you need to submit in order to post a position. So the job posting itself, that's what's going to be listed online on like the Workday website. The job responsibilities worksheet, or what we know as JRWs, and then the comm requisition form. Now, you're not going to be able to submit or be able to fill in all of the information on these forms, like IOs on the comm requisition form, but you can at least get a good head start on these, because it's good to get them, as finished as you can, because once you submit them to HR, it is a little bit of a process for them to go through the different chains of approval before your position can even get posted. So the quicker you can get started on that, the better when your NOAA does arrive. At this time, we usually like to also just start to have conversations with facilities. Think about space. If you're a junior faculty member and you don't have a team that has dedicated space yet, this is a good time before the NOAA arrives to just start having those conversations about where might a staff member sit, where can I find space for someone. Same thing with equipment. Your new staff member that you're eventually going to hire for your project is going to need a computer or is going to need other equipment. So this is just the time to start thinking about that.
Phone line, that always
Yes.
takes forever.
A
Phone line.
phone, yes. And another little shout out for ASAP. If you're not as lucky to be in the Department of Pediatrics, where you might have some staffing, CTSI does have the ASAP program that Abby talked about, which can help your study get off the ground. And then another just thing, if you're working with other institutions, universities, good time to start just gathering different contacts for them, because as we start to negotiate subawards and do other contracts with them, it's just good to start getting those all organized, which will help streamline things for you once you get your NOAA and get things rolling.
And what did we miss? There's a lot of people on this call that have a lot of experience. And so I'm just wondering if anyone is like, oh, they forgot this, or this, I also usually do this, or is there anything anyone wants to add? Like I said, we're crowdsourcing our one pager. So this is for researchers by researchers. Chime in if you have any other things that you would think about at this stage. You guys are quiet today.
Sophia put in the chat, thank you so much, Sophia, that her study was in 3 phases. So the first phase didn't include human subjects, so she was able to get approval for that first to get the ball rolling. That's a really smart move. See what you can do.
Yeah, the IRB approval, like prior to receiving the NOAA, really, I think depends on the study design, because if you're going to have something like very exploratory, maybe in the beginning with like just interviews, you can probably whip together like that IRB quickly. And yeah, so I think it is really study dependent on getting those through. Definitely.
Yeah, if you have a sequential study, you're in luck. It all has to start at once. You're a little less so, but there's still things you can do.
Hey, LJ, I have a suggestion.
Yeah, go.
So at this time is when I would start also thinking about putting together a regulatory binder. Now that the IRB communications and correspondences are coming in, and we need like equipment certificates and things like that, I have fallen into the trap before of not putting together a regulatory binder as these things are coming in and having to go back and create one. And that's how a lot of things get missed, or it just creates more work. So I find it easier to create one as soon as possible. And then as different pieces of information are coming in during this process, that's when we start adding them to the regulatory binder, just to make sure it's up to date as we move forward.
Great point, Tim. Thank you.
Yeah, we will add that in. Good one. And Heather, I saw in the chat, you said something about international studies. Do you want to shout that out? I know you're the expert in that.
Sure. Well, I guess I just wanted to say that, just if you are interacting with international studies, it's a whole other ballgame with consortiums, and the EU is very difficult to deal with. So just keep in mind that we submitted a study back in, I guess it was October, and we're still waiting, here it is, almost March, and we're probably not going to be able to start the study right away. So I don't even want to get into it, but there's a whole lot of other things that need to be done. So if anybody's starting an international study, just make sure that you give enough time, because there's plenty more to do in addition to the IRB and things like that. So yeah, GDPR. Thanks, Candace. Yeah, Candace knows all about this. She's been working mostly with it. So just trying to get it through.
Thank you.
It definitely is throwing a wrench in our stuff. Thanks.
I think Sophia has her hand raised, I think.
Yeah, I like what Tim brought up about the e-regulatory binder. That was kind of something I wasn't familiar with. So right now I have it in REDCap. So I don't know if there's a specific format people use. So it'd be nice to get resources about that.
I can jump in. I know Tim knows way more about this than I do, but at the I think it's just College of Medicine, totally correct me if I'm wrong, but we did have a format in REDCap that was a template that folks could use that's been around for a few years. But recently we moved to the Florence system, and folks at the College of Medicine may have gotten emails about training. Sophia, you look surprised, so I'll send you that email. Florence, like Florence Nightingale, I think that's what it's named after, but I'll send you, we'll put that in the resources as well. But there's a training for PIs, and then there's a training for staff to how to incorporate that. So it's not a Penn State system. It's like it's an own company, but we use it for those e-reg binders.
Sounds like we may want to have a regulatory binder session.
Yes.
Yeah.
I agree. Yes.
Awesome.
But
All right,
thanks,
well,
yeah,
let's
thanks
keep
for
moving.
asking
We want to
that.
make sure we get to the case.
Perfect. Okay, so you've worked on your IRB, or you've been working on your LDP, submitted to the IRB, and you've got approval. So at this point, your DO is going to work to submit that documentation to the NIH saying we've met our deadline. At that point, you're just going to be waiting for your NOAA to arrive. But now that you have your IRB approved or you have your LDP, if you're going to be working with another organization or institution and you're going to need a DUA, at this point you can begin to initiate that process. So a DUA is different than a subaward. I just want to norm everyone to that, and then different from the IRB itself. So this is really a contract between two universities agreeing upon the data sharing that's going to be occurring across these sites. And so there is a form that you can submit through ORA where you can outline the information with the institute you're going to be sharing the information with, and then you'll get a email back. Typically, I always get email from Dustin Hopewell. I don't know if it's always Dustin Hopewell, but that's usually who I work with as far as DUAs. And then the contracts office is going to negotiate on your behalf between the lawyers at that respective university. And so this can be a bit of a lengthy process. How long did
Too long.
Yeah, a little long on the last one that we did. So that's why we kind of just like to throw this in here. Get started on that as soon as possible, just because that can kind of throw some delays and things, especially if you're going to be working with like multi-site. So on the last project that we did, we had to do 4 different DUAs. So they can take some time, negotiating those between the different universities.
And Abby is putting together our next section, which is totally on DUAs, which is why we're going to kind of gloss over it a little bit now. But we'll talk more about, or Abby will talk more about DUAs at that point.
Yep.
Okay, so then it comes, and the thing that's really frustrating for me is that when the notice of award actually arrives, like you've already celebrated, you're already stressed, you're already started, your study team's meeting, like you're kind of, it's like the NOAA comes after you've already done all of the work. So you should celebrate, but also at that point, like I came home and I said, honey, my NOAA came. He's like, well, we knew that months ago. And I'm like, I know. Okay. So at this point, you read your NOAA carefully. It's like mine is like 6 or 7 pages. You want to keep an eye out for any special terms or conditions like what I showed you with the human subjects. And you'll set up a meeting with your grants officer. Joan has been awesome in meeting with us, and we kind of read through it. And once that NOAA arrives, like click the button to get your job posted to HR, because it has to go through approvals. It has to go through the whole hiring restriction. Then it has to be posted for a week before you can interview, and then you have to find the references. So it could be 3 months before you actually can get someone hired, and like when they can actually start, because they have to give notice at their old job and all of the things. So just make sure that you get that going. And then really important is to start thinking about getting an IO, because to buy anything, to post your position, everyone asks you, well, what's the IO? What's the IO? So that's something that you want to make sure that people are working on getting you an IO. And then the last is the arranging the subawards if applicable. We've kind of already touched it, and I want to get us to the case, so we're going to kind of gloss over this. But when you are doing the subawards, the lawyers do most of it, or the grants officers do most of it. But from a PI standpoint, I always look back at my budget justification, Because if you remember, you wrote your budget almost a year and a half or 2 years ago, and everyone, salaries have increased since then, or rates have gone up on various things that you need. So you always have to sort of look at the budget justification, and maybe, now you've hired another staff member, and so you don't need to have, this person, you use that salary instead of that salary. There's all different scenarios that your budget justification will change. So that's a really, I think, important part of all of this. All right, Joan and Tom, anything you want to mention at this point? I know we haven't heard from you guys.
Well, based off the conversation so far, our role seems a little bit more minor compared to the hands deep you'll be with your IRB protocol and working with HRPP. I will say for your just-in-time, one thing to remember is you're always going to work with your DRA in your department to come up with all of your documents. That would be your city training certificates, whether it's for any key personnel, so they could be people at other sites. In terms of your other support, you'll work with your DRA as well. And just a reminder, which I'm sure most of you are aware at this point in time, it does require a digital signature. So you have to verify as the PI, as the faculty, that you are, agreeing that everything on that other support is correct by digitally signing it. And then I, as the grant officer, am the signing official. So in terms of how the information gets shared back at just in time to NIH would be through me, because I have the authority to do that for the institution. So it really isn't something you necessarily can send yourself. Most of the time I upload it in ERA Commons through a just-in-time form for the second or sometimes third, fourth, fifth, depending on, how your project is. Some of that will be something I email on behalf of the PI and just provide congruence from my office. So those are just kind of little things you don't really think about as you're preparing like the back end processes in that regard.
We have one more slide until we hit our case.
Yeah, so I think this will nicely lead us into the case that we're going to be talking about. And this is kind of where, staff, it's our time to get that project off the ground. Obviously, we know that there are a lot of things to go into study startup, and this list is not the complete list, but this is just some of the big things I think we all think about when it's time for us to get projects off the ground. The most important thing, outlining study procedures and starting to write that manual of procedures, super, super important as we're training staff, as we're having people help with the team, to have that manual that everyone can reference on the processes of and the protocol for the research study. Organizing and reviewing measures. A lot of times these grants were written a year ago, and so it's a good time for us to look back through those measures, make sure that's what we want to use, and adjustments that need done. Thinking about your REDCap, if that's what you're going to be using for data collection or any kind of data organization tools that you're going to be using. Starting to develop tracking spreadsheets for the various, stipends or study visits or, very study specific. Beginning to think about what the participant stipends are going to be. Are you going to, try for a Greenfire exemption? And if not, going through the Greenfire process and getting all of that organized. Submitting your IRB when it's ready. If you did submit an LDP, having that launch meeting for the team for the first time, get everyone together and get the ball rolling. Starting to organize your finances, creating budget tracking, working with your FA to determine, what reports they might give you and kind of how to manage that for your study. Submitting your protocol to clinicaltrials.gov if applicable, and then just, starting to purchase supplies necessary for the study.
Great.
And really all of this is like kind of done simultaneously. It's not, just a big list, but I think we all know that. Okay, great. So in echo fashion here, we're going to talk about, we have a case here that was very nicely provided to us by Tim. Tim is from the Department of Medicine, correct? And so I'm going to have Tim kind of introduce this scenario to us, and then we're going to kind of work through together and kind of crowdsource some ideas of how we might help in Tim's case here. So Tim, if you want to go ahead and maybe introduce us a little bit to your case, that'd be great.
Hi, thank you. So my name's Tim Sheehan. I'm a research project manager in the Department of Medicine, Division of Pulmonary Allergy and Critical Care. So this is an NIH funded study, and we have IRB approval. And then as a research project manager, it's now my job to figure out how to take it from paper to real life scenarios. And there are a lot of things to think about, as we just heard. So the first thing, and I'm going to share my screen just so it can help kind of guide me, but I'm not able to do that.
Yeah, go ahead.
So,
Go ahead now, Tim.
okay, so, all right, so this is kind of what, so what our team did that was very helpful and continues to do, not as much, but we still have a standing meeting every week. And we have an agenda that we build off of and we work through every week to see who needs to do what are the things we need to do, and how are we going to do them. And right here on the left here is just an example of that agenda. So this is a more like advanced agenda because we build off that every week. And I highlighted some of the main components that we need to talk about in order to implement our study design. And I kind of transferred them over here to the right. So some of the things we need to think about is study team communication. The way we did that is we have weekly standing meetings, and we set up a OneDrive to share documents and share, the notes that you see on the left here. We have to think about study design, as Erica just mentioned. Like, by the time the IRB is approved, do we still want to do exactly what we told them we were going to do? Are our study personnel still the same study personnel when we first submitted it? Do we need to add people? Do we need to remove them? Recruitment. This is when recruitment starts for us. IRB approval. Part of the IRB submission is saying, here's how we are going to recruit participants. Here's when we're going to do it. Here's the materials we are going to use. Once we get approval, they say, okay, we approve you to recruit participants in this manner. So then we actually start doing it. And you'll see I highlighted some of the things in red here on the left, the things that we did. So a research coordinator of ours started pre-screening clinic schedules. We got permission to do that from the IRB to pre-screen providers' clinic schedules to see, are they going to be seeing someone who may be eligible to participate in the study? And if so, that's when we reach out to them right there in person at the clinic visit. It's all about tracking and documentation and making sure everybody's on the same page. So we create spreadsheets for potential candidates. Recruitment is so important that apparently it appears twice on this document, which I didn't know until I pulled it up. So what other forms of recruitment? So postings, mailings, we got IRB approval. Now we have to reach out to the print shop to actually print them. We have to figure out where are we going to post these and start posting them. If we're going to be getting referrals from other clinicians, we need to present the study to them and talk to them about how they can communicate with us. If we're using human subjects, we have to create participant ID numbers. Something I don't always think about right off the bat until I enroll someone, and I think, what ID number do they going to have? So these are some of the things that we have to start doing. Again, the IRB, do we still want, are there any mods that need to be put in? Personnel that need to be removed, so on and so forth. Now is the time to start doing that.
This is awesome. So I'm sorry to interrupt real quick, but I just wanted to see, like, I love the way that you have this organized, and it's different than how we doing it. I'm wondering if other people have ways that they do this, or Jessica just put in the chat something about project management software. Can you say something about that?
Sure. So I'm on a team in HHD at University Park, and we utilize Asana for our project management software. And it's like a online cloud-based software, but it really allows us to lay all of these pieces out and then track the status of all of the tasks that need to be completed and communicate with each other while we do. So it's been a huge help and kind of life changing coming from Calm, where I did not use this, to a team that did. It just kind of alleviates all the paper and the checklists and things like that. It's all there in the software for you.
Thank you. Should I keep going?
This is so detailed. Well, I'm just curious, you know, I'm looking at this, Tim, and I'm like, wow, this is so detailed and it's great. And I'm wondering, like, how do you go from like the paper to like dragging your PI through making all of these decisions? Like, do you just send them this document, or like how do you like organize a meeting?
Yeah, so I don't have it on this document, but one of the things that we always put at the end of our documents is to-dos. You know, I have them here highlighted in red, things that we have to do. So what we do is we assign responsibilities, we delegate, you know, whose job is it to do this, and you know, what do they need to do the task. And that's why we have weekly meetings, is because next week we update each other on who has done what still needs to be done going forward. So that's one way that that's usually one way that we do it, is just, you know, divide and conquer, based on how do I get PIs to do it. Again, it's all about communication. Dr. Bascom and I have a weekly meeting. We call it Tim's Time. You know, we have a weekly meeting to update each other. Like if I need things from her, if she needs things from me. Things like you see the two folders behind me. One is they're both signature folders. You know, things I need her to sign, and when she signs them, she moves them to the folder for me to file or to distribute accordingly. So communication, however it works for your team. And all these methods, by the way, were developed through trial and error. What worked, we kept. What didn't, we got rid of. And it's just adapting to, and each study is different as well. This is just this particular case that we did.
Yeah, awesome, Tim. Thank you so much for sharing that. I'm wondering if there's any other staff or PMs with us today that kind of want to share their approach to study startup, because I think that, you know, as staff, there's no like hard or fast rule of how this is done. I think we all just kind of learn, but I think this would be a good opportunity to kind of share, you know, with a team of, you know, like-minded individuals, how we kind of get this going. Love to hear other approaches.
Just checking the chat. Thanks everybody for putting all the great project management software tools.
Or any difficulties that people encounter during the startup phase that maybe you want to share, and maybe we can kind of work through.
I can share a difficulty we had.
Sure.
So product. So for this study, we're trying to ask individuals to switch from cigarette use to electronic cigarette use. And we had to figure out what product to use. And we decided on one brand of electronic cigarettes, and then something happened out of our control with, you know, government policies and electronic cigarettes, and we were no longer able to use that. So then that was a big difficulty for us, trying to figure out what product are we going to use, and how are we going to get it, and how are we going to distribute it to the participants. And that was just something we were going to be using a product in the grant, in the IRB the entire time. And then right when we were about to get started up, we had to switch. And the way we troubleshot that is we reached out to other study teams, to be honest. There are other teams in public health sciences that are doing trials like this and had more experience with using electronic cigarettes. We reached out to them and asked them, what do you do? What is your experience with this? We invited them to our weekly meetings, and they were able to walk us through this and help us with it.
Mm-hmm. That's great. I wanted to highlight Beth Connor's comment in the chat. So if you don't know Beth, Beth taught me everything I know about budget management. So thank you so much, Beth. She's our FA in Department of Medicine and has so much knowledge on this. I think what's really important about Beth's comment is making sure that you understand finance policy. A lot of times, you know, you put your dream protocol together and then you submit it and you get funded, yay. And then you realize that you either can or can't do exactly what you envisioned. So I would strongly, and I know Beth strongly recommends, as you're putting your proposal together, kind of talking, you know, when possible, a lot of these things are deadline based, but when possible, find out who your FA is in your department. Yeah, and buying something like an e-cigarette for a grant I'm sure is challenging. You know, Penn State has a lot of finance policies of what's allowed and what's not allowed, but knowing what the rules are as early as possible will save you a lot of headaches down the road. So, you know, whether you can pivot after you get awarded or if you can, you know, talk to your FA and learn what the rules are as you're submitting your proposal so that you don't have to kind of change things and may result in budget changes or protocol changes after you get awarded. That will save you a lot of headaches. Thank you so much, Beth. And yes, and we will make all these resources available. Thanks, Chelsea, for asking. Any other?
So I advanced the slide just because as a PI, you know, like you write a grant and it's like, okay, we'll just do what's in the grant. And it's like, there's 1,000 questions that a project manager's brain comes up with. And I was so happy when Erica and Kate Ferguson and I sat down, they're the project team for our new grant, and they sort of just mapped out for me like the entire grant. And you know, we have like 7 different timelines, and like what this whiteboard looks like, which it probably looks like nothing to all of you, but for me, I'm like, oh, this is the grant. And then they wrote in red there, you know, what all of their questions were, you know, based on what they had read in the grant. And it just was such a like eye-opening moment for me. So do you want to talk about like the process that you did and then see if other people, and then I think Candace has her hand up.
So we just wanted to kind of share an example, maybe if you're like a new project manager and, you know, or just looking for a place to start when you've been just started, you've been, you know, given a grant, given a protocol to look at, and you're like, all right, let's get this study off the ground. This is just an approach that I like to use that's helpful for me to start to organize my to-dos and to-dos kind of come out of this process as well, but also just helps me as a project manager better understand the flow of the research process itself. So typically, like after reviewing the grant and the IRB protocol, I really look at the research processes as kind of like very distinct categories. So like looking at recruitment very explicitly, the eligibility screening very explicitly, consent, and so on, you know, the different time points for your data collection. And that's kind of, this whiteboard was just like a snippet of a very large whiteboard, but that's kind of like everything that's in a box or those like very discrete time points. And just looking at exactly what the flow for that's going to be. And in mapping out that flow, are there anything, like any questions that I have for my PI that are not clear from reading the grant? In the last, you know, project that I helped do this for, it's in the ICU. So like some of the questions I think are in there, you know, are we going to the bedside at this time? Or things that are not clear that you're not going to be able to know from reading the grant. That's probably in your PI's head that they have probably a good idea of. So I like to, during this time, come up with questions, but then also usually things that are for me to do or to create kind of come out of this process. And so, you know, in this process, I'm identifying gaps that I'm seeing that I can come up with questions for. So then what LJ and I and Kate had, we just kind of had a conversation where you know, we went through everything, went through my questions. We all left with a really clear understanding of like what our marching orders were to do. And as far as like things that we had to create, and, you know, we were able to resolve questions in that manner. So that's just how our team kind of communicates during that kind of like study startup phase. And I just wanted to kind of share that as an example for maybe you to try with your team, but also really interested to see how other people might approach this and, you know, get a chance to learn from others as well.
Are there other PIs on the call that have had these eye-opening meetings? This was a 3-hour meeting and I was like, there are so many questions that I thought were all answered and none of them are.
Yeah, I would say this happens to me on almost every project that I start. And on projects where it didn't happen, then all this stuff comes up like halfway through the project, which is a bad thing. So now I've learned to go to the project staff before anything starts and make sure that these questions don't exist and they're just not speaking up about them, because you don't want to, I've learned that the hard way, you don't want to get halfway through a project and then have this stuff start coming up.
That's a
Candace, I
great
see you have your hand up.
Yes, not a PI, but working with a lot of PMs, something that I have, kind of noticed is that PMs don't always have the confidence to speak up, especially in these big meetings if you're working with a lot of PIs. But PMs, you've been doing what you do. There's a reason you're doing what you're doing. Definitely speak up. You could have ideas on how to better structure. I came up with the idea for one of our studies where we're doing it as a 2-phase study rather than a single-phase study. So we can, use input from phase 1 to make phase 2 better. And then we can split up the IRB a little bit better. So if you have these thoughts, absolutely speak up. You can discuss with your PI. Just because something is prescribed one way does not mean that that is the only way that it can be done.
I love that
Yeah.
point. We constantly need to be changing what we thought we would do and what we need to do. And it's okay
Yeah.
to make changes.
And I think that sometimes if you're a new PM, you're afraid to, well, this is what is written in the protocol, or this is what the grant says, but sometimes we do need to make little, deviations to make, especially in process, just to make it easier. Yeah.
And if there ever is a change to an aim, you can, we had to make a pretty major change to one of our grants, and we just wrote a 1-page letter to the NIH explaining why we need to make the change and we're going to do it differently. And there are rules about, if you make changes that are part of the aims, the aims of the grant, then that needs to be pre-approved by NIH, but little changes do not need to go through the NIH, just big ones. No others think. I'm going to stop sharing so I can see faces.
Yeah.
We only have a few minutes left, so we want to hear. And actually, I think Jessica needs to say something.
I'm so sorry to cut this great discussion, and I second all of the project teams. I mean, this is really tough work. And as Tim said, every project is different and has its own hurdles and pitfalls, and we're always kind of breaking the rules, which is part of the fun of doing this work. But it's nice to have these teams and contracts and finance that can really help us figure out how to navigate kind of breaking those or pushing those boundaries. But I just wanted to thank everyone for their participation today. We will have another session on March 15th, and that will be with Abby talking to us about data use agreements. So same time, same place. And we do really look at those evaluations, so that should be sent out fairly soon. If you could complete them, we do like your ideas. We plan to continue this series in some form, so your thoughts are really helpful to us. Have a wonderful Friday, and thank you all for participating today. Take care. Thank you, LJ and Erica. That was wonderful. And Tim, thank you so much. You guys need anything?
No. We just wanted to debrief real
Okay.
quick.
Okay, hold on.
Yes, hang on one second. Someone scheduled a 10 o'clock meeting, so I'm gonna let them know I'm gonna be a minute late.
Oh, yeah, no worries. Well,
No,
we can
it's
debrief later.
Hi,
it's
Jesse, you
no,
don't have to
it's
stay if you don't
totally
want
fine.
to.
I am not the most important person at this meeting, so
Okay.
Yeah, Heather Costigan said, I have to hop to another meeting. I'm like, what meeting does she?
Project
Oh, we all have a meeting to attend, but so just real quick.
Okay. What do you
all
think?
good. I love the energy around this.
I think the PMs are just too afraid to speak up because
Yes.
the last time it was all the junior faculty that was talking. And so I think that they're just a little afraid to speak up.
Yeah.
I think that's a little bit, I mean, I like the dynamics of this one, but I do think that's probably And
Yeah.
that kind of came up when Abby reaching out for cases about like
Yeah.
pushing
right.
back on your, I don't mean
Yeah.
pushing back, but like having those hard conversations or
Mhm.
having that like, I don't know how to do this, like please help with your
Right.
PI.
It's like a managing up, but making sure that you're on the same page with your PI and the PI recognizes you as a critical.
I'm just surprised that the PMs didn't like say like, oh, I do it this way, or I do it like, that's not like pushing, like, I don't know. I feel like that's not super sensitive to say like, what's your
Well,
You know,
process?
I think it was like with Candace's point with like pushing.
Oh,
back-
yeah. No, that,
Yes,
point
it's
for sure.
working with your PI.
I
and
guess I had
some are
hoped
more-
like I moved the screen forward so they could see Erica's whiteboard. So then they could be like, oh, I know what they're talking. I thought maybe they didn't understand what we were asking them, that maybe we didn't ask
Right.
the questions
Mhm.
well. Cause like I was expecting so much more engaged, like people be like, oh, I do it this way and I do it this way. I lay out all the measures. I make a time, like,
Mhm.
but nobody
Yeah.
offered anything. So
Yeah.
I'm a little.
Well, yeah, and I think some people are here. I mean, some people may not have done it in this
Yeah, they
level of
might- yeah.
detail, so they're here to
Yeah,
learn.
that's true.
Because I'm thinking of like me as a very first year like project manager. I mean, like a lot of times like you have to do it a lot to like
Be able to say what
to
your
say
process is.
yes.
Yeah.
And so like they're learning this. And so I still think it was still helpful to
Yeah.
like
I
And-
think it's super helpful because part of the battle is like, you don't know who to talk to. You don't
Yep.
know what questions to ask. It's hard to anticipate like with the e-cigarettes or those, it sounds good on
Yeah.
paper, you're trying to do good work. It takes a while in the system to learn like what the roadblocks
Yes.
are gonna be.
Yeah.
And like
Absolutely.
how to like think those ahead. And I think it's good. I think it was good to like, I think it was good. Like, don't be too hard on yourself, LJ.
no,
Like,
Well, I mean, I guess I just think like I was thinking like, okay, the sign of a good echo is lots of discussion, but I think like our conversation about like maybe echo's not the right fit. Like if echo wasn't part of this, I would be like, that was a great session. That was a great webinar.
but I think I would say that it was a good, people were active in the chat. They were responding to each other.
Yeah.
They were adding information. Like, I think often we discount like people in the chat, but we have, at
Is it-
Echo, we've had to like recognize the fact that there was a lot of people who are more introverted and not really as apt to speak up.
Yeah.
And it's
54
also,
people were there. So
Yeah, no,
there
that's
were a lot of
Oh,
people that
yeah.
were talking to each
Yeah,
other,
we
and
got the
you
info out there.
also don't know like about the connections that are made outside of the session too. Like, people
They
were
could be
putting
talking
stuff in
around the
like,
lunchroom. Yeah.
right, and somebody could reach out and be like, hey, Tim, can you share your list? Or, hey,
Yeah.
Chelsea, tell me more about the free whatever, because people's names are on those chats.
Yeah.
And we could see it afterwards. I
Yeah.
also think if you don't have a good system, you're not really going to speak up.
yes,
Yeah.
exactly.
Or if you're
And
still
And that's why we're
figuring,
here is
Yeah.
right to give
right,
them.
if you're
Yeah,
still
it's-
figuring out
yes.
your system too,
Yes.
like he's
Yeah.
got a
We thought
list,
too, yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And so
Okay.
they're absorbing. I think
Yeah.
it was good.
I
know
think
you
it was,
guys-
yeah.
Okay, good.
I thought it was
Yeah,
good.
I-
No,
All
I
right,
loved
well,
it.
thank you both. Thank you all. Jess, I'm sure you will do this, but can you also reach out to Joan and Tom and everyone and say thank you? I'm gonna be tied in meetings until 3 o'clock today, so like I'm not gonna
Okay,
be-
yeah, I'll write myself a note.
Thank you. And if they have any like maybe ask them without me CC'd on it, like if they have any feedback on how the session went, I'd be curious to know what they thought. If they were like, this was a waste of my time because we didn't get to talk, or that kind of thing, or
Right.
if they thought it was good,
Yeah, that's a good.
Well, I
I
don't know
feel-
what their
I feel like-
intention is. Is it just to make sure we're not telling them bad things?
No, I mean, it was sort of, we said it was a collaboration where, they would answer questions and there really weren't questions. So that's why they didn't talk. But I think their contribution was really around the creation of the materials that we produced. So
And partnership and collaboration
Oh,
that we
no.
had together.
Yes,
big time
yes.
hearing just broke. Okay.
Oh, no.
Oh my God, thank God I found that.
Okay.
Okay, my little diamond is now loose. All right.
Okay.
Well, all right. Thank you guys. Gotta run. Thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you, Jess.
Bye,
Thanks,
bye.
everybody.
Bye.